Just before this episode, here's how you can get more from Never a Truer Word. If you're listening to this podcast on Spotify, you can subscribe to this channel to get early access to the weekly analysis episodes, video episodes so you can see the statements as I analyse them, and exclusive content too. And if you're here on YouTube, then become a member of the channel to get early access to everything and exclusive content not available anywhere else. To find out what a person talking wants you to believe, it's often as simple as looking at the words they repeat over and over. Welcome to Never a Truer Word, where we look at the words that people choose to use to see if they're telling the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, using my statement investigation process, which anyone can learn to give themselves an advantage in understanding the people all around them. This is part 2 of my look at Amanda Knox and how she describes the morning it was discovered her housemate Meredith Kercher had been murdered. Do go back to part 1 if you haven't done so already before this final part. So many great comments came in from the audience following that. I'll deal with one specific point that came up multiple times in this episode. For the other ones, do look out for the question and answer episode, which will come later this month when we will talk about the comments and questions and observations in detail. Now, in this episode, I'll look primarily at how Amanda deals with the police, and I will share my conclusions as to whether I think she was involved in the murder or not. Episode 1 focused on events before the police turned up, and my conclusions having looked at that, or my observations having looked at that, chaotic storytelling. She was all over the place, backwards and forwards in time, often having to go backwards and bring things to the present time in order to make what she was saying make sense. Often that is an indication of deception. The only thing I'd say about Amanda was she was consistently chaotic. There's a theme of cleanliness, about dirt, about lack of hygiene, and about things that were very clean. She was omitting a lot. I could see that as she spoke. Why was she doing that? Was it just to save time, or is she hiding some details away there? Some inconsistencies in her words as well. Meredith, the victim, was quite a low priority for Amanda as she was talking there. A lot of present tense around Meredith's room. Amanda's tone changed when she was talking about being outside this locked room of Meredith. All in all, lots of red flags. On the reassuring side for Amanda, I did not think she was selling me a story, trying to really persuade me or convince me of something that happened, apart from a couple of things. She said a lot of things happened immediately. Why they need to tell us they happened immediately? Why not just tell us they happened in the timeline that they happened? And also, how weird and confused she found the whole thing. Now, it might have been weird and confusing, but she kept on repeating how weird and confusing it was. So this is part 2. It's the same interview. It seems to be the same answer that continues. Let's hear from Amanda Knox.
There was, Philomena immediately started screaming, just screaming. I did not see into the room. I was away, so I didn't really, all I heard from her was blood and a foot. So she kept saying the words for blood and foot, and screaming, and was hysterical, and immediately the police pushed us out of the, Raphael grabbed me and shuffled me out, but we were told we have to leave now. And I remember slumping down by the front door, just outside of the front door, trying to make sense of what was being said. So I knew there was blood, and I knew there was a foot. And I thought that they were suggesting that there was a dismembered foot in the room. And that would cause someone to be hysterical. I did not know what to make of that. So what I did was, the most automatic thing was to call my mom. I actually had called her once before already when I was on my way back to Raphael's the first time, because I was just I don't know what to make of this. I don't know if I should be worried or not. So I asked her advice, and she said to ask Raphael. And this time I just told her, Mom, I don't know what's going on. They say that there's a foot in Meredith's room. And like, she was like, what are you talking about? Like, just as shocked as I was. And I was like, look, I don't know what's happening. Like, give me a second. I need to talk to Raphael. He needs to talk to the other people. Like, I need to figure out what's going on. And so that, just outside of the house that morning, was just incredibly confusing. Trying to gather information, sitting there shocked, like,
a lot of Amanda's very usual markers there as she talks. She says, there was, Philomena started screaming, just screaming. I did not see into the room. I was away, so I didn't really, all I heard from her was blood and a foot. I get the impression here, again, she's creating distance, that she did not know what was inside this room when it was opened. One of the markers of that, apart from just the fact that she feels the need to tell us that she did not see inside the room, is she says, I was away, so I didn't really. And it's that really that qualifies it. That means really, it doesn't mean 100% totally. What really means is mostly. So she did see into the room. I think this is an attempt to create a little bit of distance between Amanda and what happened. She continues saying, so she kept saying the words for blood and foot. I imagine that means the Italian words for blood and foot. And screaming and was hysterical. And immediately the police pushed us out of there. Raphael grabbed me and he shuffled me out, but we were told to leave now. Out of the where? Immediately the police pushed us out of the, and she doesn't say out of the what, she doesn't say the what, she says out of the, Raphael grabbed me. Now, was that she pushed us out of the room, she was going to say, but she's already told us, and I think maybe a little bit deceptively, that she wasn't in the room, so she doesn't quite know what to say. And then again, we've just got one of these great Amanda Knox things where she says something and then kind of corrects it. So this time it was the police pushed us out of the, and then it wasn't the police that did anything. Raphael grabbed me and shuffled me out. Again, she doesn't say where she was shuffled out of, but we were told we have to leave now. So just a bit more of this chaotic storytelling there. More chaos. Philomena started screaming, just screaming. I always say, when the word just is said, always look out for deception, potential deception. And I think we have it here. Now, this one might not be malicious deception. Remember, all deception isn't malicious. But Philomena started screaming, just screaming. So that means all Philomena was doing, because she was just screaming, all Philomena was doing was screaming. However, as it turns out, she kept saying the words for blood and foot. Well, what was she doing? Was she saying the words for blood and foot? Or was she just screaming? It's not quite all hanging together here again. Amanda continues, and I remember slumping down by the front door, just outside the front door. We have this concept again through the words I remember, that Meredith is telling us what she can remember. Now, sometimes when people do this, it's what they choose to remember. And if they are challenged at a later time, then as to why they didn't say something, they can say, oh, look, I didn't remember. I told you all the things I remember, but I didn't remember that. So she says, and I remember slumping down by the front door, just outside the front door, trying to make sense of what was being said. So I knew there was blood, and I knew there was a foot. And I thought they were suggesting there was the dismembered foot in the room. I thought they were suggesting that there was a dismembered foot in the room. So she, again, it's this distance thing. It's all this confusion that she's sowing through this word, suggesting. No, I thought they were saying there was a dismembered foot in the room, which would make a lot of sense from what she has said. It's suggesting. Why has she, again, just gone to this slight distance thing of what they were suggesting? Look, I can't say this was the case here, but if she knew there was more than a dismembered foot in the room, then maybe suggesting would be the word that you would use if that was where you were at. And that could cause someone to be hysterical. Now, this is about the third time that she said Philomena was hysterical. I do not think she liked Philomena's reaction. Again, that doesn't necessarily mean bad things have happened or Amanda has made bad things happen. It's just what you can learn when you analyse a statement. And this focus on Philomena's reaction and the screaming, just screaming and shouting blood and shouting foot, and just really focusing on the hystericalness of, as she sees it, of Philomena. I don't think she liked Philomena's reaction at all. She says, and I remember just slumping down by the front door, just outside the front door, trying to make sense of what was being said. So I knew there was blood, I knew there was a foot, and I thought they were suggesting there was a dismembered foot. So once again, we have this conveyance from Amanda of how confused she was, how she did not know what was happening. And that's what confusion is. You do not know what was happening. So she gets that across in the phrases trying to make sense of what was being said. Now, that's curious in itself because it's not trying to make sense of what's happened. And I thought they were suggesting. So she really wants to make it clear to us, and this is repeated over and over again in her language. She really wants to make it clear how she did not know what was going on. She continues, I did not know what to make of that. So what I did was the most automatic thing was to call my mom. Actually, I had called her once already when I was on my way back to Raphael's the first time. Here we go with another jump back in time. And all we can conclude from this is that she so consistently has to go back and tell us something that she didn't tell us in her first pass at telling this story, that we can be certain that there are things being missed out here. Now, is there anything else she's been missed out, or did she correct the record every single time? Well, I doubt that. I really do doubt that. I don't think this is a straightforward, open, transparent telling of the story. There are things, whether it's by accident, whether it's the scatty nature that's going on, whether it was traumatic and it's all a bit messed up in her head, or whether it's deliberate deception or being very careful about the things she tells us, but things are being missed out and she has to keep going back to talk about what they are. Like, the most automatic thing was to call my mum. I actually had called her once before when I was on my way back to Raphael's the first time. That's the second thing she hasn't mentioned about being on the way back to Raphael's. In the first episode, she did not mention the mop that she had picked up from the kitchen to take back to Raphael's. We have this theme of not knowing again. I did not know what to make of that. This is one of the things she says. I don't know what to make of this. I don't know if I should be worried or not. So we still have all this I don't know what's going on concept from her. Could be the truth, but feels like she's really forcing the issue through. I did not know. I don't know. I don't know. She continues, so I asked her advice and she said to ask Raphael. What kind of advice is that? Why this advice? Mom, I don't know what's happening. Raphael and I have discovered the house has been broken into. The police have come here and we've found something in the bed. What is it that Mom said, ask Raphael, that Meredith would not know? That doesn't make sense, doesn't hang together as well. She continues, and this time I just told her, Mom, I don't know what's going on. So this time, I just told her, Mom, I don't know what's going on. So she's told her something the previous time, and now she's talking about this time. She's flagging it up in her words that she told her something different the first time, and this time it's something different. That's how we use that phrase, this time. Last time, I didn't get a game when I decided I was going to play football. This time, I did. It's a comparative statement. However, if we look at what she said, I called her once before already when I was on my way back to Raphael's the first time because I was just I don't know what to make of this. I don't know if I should be worried or not. And then she says the difference is that this time I told her Mom, I don't know what's going on. So we are being force-fed this narrative, the suggestions, potentially the truth from Amanda, but she really wants us to believe it, that she did not know what was going on. And I don't believe she's being truthful about the conversation she had with her mum, because she infers through the use of this time that the two phone calls had different content, but when she explains what the content is both times, it's the exact same. She says in this extract, I said to my mom, I don't know what's going on. They say that there's a foot in Meredith's room. And she was like, what are you talking about? Just as shocked as I was. And I was like, I don't know what's happening. Give me a second. I need to talk to Raphael. He needs to talk to the other people. I need to figure out what's going on. And we have a focus there on what is going on, not a focus on what has happened. She told her mom, I don't know what's going on. She's just as shocked as I was. I don't know what's happening, present tense. I need to figure out what's going on. Interesting use there of the sort of the present tense as she saw it at the time. So what happened was that her flatmate was murdered, and she has worked out that this happened at some point during the previous night in her telling of the story. So that's what's happened. Right now she's worried about what's going on, and that's the police are in the house. That's what's going on. The police are in the house. They've thrown them out. She obviously is not aware of exactly what the police are doing in the house, and her focus there is on not on what's happened, not on what happened to Meredith, but on what's going on. She continues, and so that just outside that morning was just incredibly confusing. Trying to gather information, sitting there shocked like. Few indicators of deception there. And so is storytelling. It's jumping over. It's giving us a reason why things happened rather than just giving us linear events. And two uses of just. Just outside of the house that morning was just incredibly confusing. That second use of just incredibly confusing. She wants us to focus only on that. That's what that use of just does. It's just there. Don't focus on anything else. I'm going to tell you the only thing that was happening, and I'm going to flag it up with the word just. So was that the only thing that was going on in her head? That it was incredibly confusing. Another tip for you here is, she said, trying to gather information, sitting there shocked like. Now, the word sitting is an indication of tension when someone is telling a story. If they talk about sitting or sometimes standing, but very often sitting, it indicates there was a lot of tension going on. Now, no surprise there. Her flatmate, her roommate, had just been found murdered. She was very close to discovering it and had discovered a break-in and so on. So anyone would be tense there. It's just a little tip for you there. The word sitting often indicates tension. We have more of this Amanda Knox narrative here. It was incredibly confusing. Wasn't just confusing, it was incredibly confusing. So she's turning up the severity of how confusing it was there, because if something's confusing, it's confusing. If it's incredibly confusing, it's still confusing. She said she was trying to gather information, not know what happened here, but gather information. I think this goes to the worry of what was going on in the house, what was actually happening there. And she was sitting there shocked. She really wants to tell us she did not know what was going on. Let's have some more from Amanda.
You never expect to come home to that. And I never thought that was like even the worst possibility of what was happening. I really relied on Raphael to ask questions for me, and he relayed back various information that it was Meredith, that her body was wrapped up in a blanket and stuffed in a cupboard, is what I understood from what people were saying. They said that there was blood everywhere. They were talking about her throat being slit. And I couldn't picture it. It just seemed so strange, because it's like one thing to see a scene like that on CSI or whatever, and it's another one to imagine someone you actually know, like some living person who you just talked to yesterday in those conditions. And so I was really struggling with it. I was very scared, and I was very confused. And I had these waves of emotions. Like I would all of a sudden be overcome with crying and feeling sad, and then I would be really spaced out and just looking around watching people cry or stand there despondently. And then of course the police, I remember just being super out of it when outside of the house when that was going on. I was cold. Raphael gave me his jacket, and police came and asked questions and more questions, and I was just trying to put the information together.
I think a bit of a change of tone here from the storytelling. Let's go through it. She says, you never expect to come home like that. Now, Amanda has been very good at using I to own what she says, and she does that here. She says, I never thought that was even the worst. I really relied on Raphael to ask questions for me, what I understood from what people were saying. She's very good at owning what she says with the word I, which is an indication of truthfulness. However, at the start of that extract, she begins with the word you never expect to come home to that. What has made the change happen there? That she's not talking about herself anymore. She doesn't say, I didn't expect to come home to that. She says, you never expect to come home to that. That's an interesting change. She's very good with I, but there's been a couple of times where she's used you, and this is one of them. She says, I really relied on Raphael to ask questions for me, and he relayed back various information. Again, this feels like a little bit of distance here, which is that Amanda wasn't at the centre of things. She was letting other people be at the centre of things. She was standing back from all of this, and she relied on Raphael to ask questions for me. He relayed back various information. She then says some things about Meredith, and she says, that's what I understood from what people were saying. Oh, wait a minute, are you getting your information from Raphael and he relaying back various information, or are you understanding that from what people were saying? Once more, Amanda's words don't massively hang together. We can see in this whole extract here, you never expect to come home to that. I never thought that was like the worst possibility of what was happening. I relied on Raphael to ask questions. He relayed back various information. This gives the state of Meredith. That's what I understood from what people were saying. You can see at this point her focus is on facts and process and not on emotion. Something else in Amanda's favour, as well as all this use of I, apart from when she says you, is the fact that when she's talking about Meredith, she does not downplay what happened to Meredith at all. Very often people accused of serious crimes and people guilty of serious crimes will downplay the severity, and they'll talk about things like, I didn't do it, rather than I didn't murder that person. And here she talks about Meredith stuffed in a cupboard, which is not downplaying what happened there at all. Although you'll understand that this was second-hand information to Meredith. That is what I understood from what people were saying. She really wants us to know she didn't know anything about this. She continues, they said there was blood everywhere. They were talking about her throat being slit. So we've got blood everywhere and throat being slit. Once more, not downplaying what was going on in any way whatsoever. A reassuring factor. However, again, we'll see that she's not just saying that as a fact. And, this is now an established fact. And when she gave that interview, it was an established fact. But she's making sure that she did not have this information firsthand. She's making sure that we know she got that email secondhand. She carries on. I couldn't picture it. It just seems so strange, because it's like one thing to see a scene like that on CSI or whatever, and it's another to imagine someone you actually know, like some living person who you just talked to yesterday in these conditions, and so I was really struggling with it. Now that sounds quite empathetic, but if you look at what the lines are, things like, I couldn't picture it. It's another one to imagine someone you actually know, someone you just talked to yesterday. Again, she's talking about yous, but you can see this is about her. This is not about Meredith. This point here, she's not expressing any sadness for Meredith, any anger about what happened to Meredith. It's about how Amanda's head is not processing, in her words, what happened to Meredith. Amanda continues, I was very scared and I was very confused. Now, this is the first time she used the word scared. She was talking about being creeped out before, when she was talking about walking around the apartment thinking that someone had been there, maybe someone still was there. This is the first time that she said she was scared. And that's kind of interesting, because for me, the scary thing would be thinking that you were in an apartment that had been broken into with a dead person lying there, maybe the attacker still hiding inside the apartment. But she didn't say scared then. She said she was freaked out. So scared of what at this point when the police are inside looking through the house? This seems, the police search, the police arriving seems to make her very tense and much more scared. And she says she was scared, but she doesn't say what she was scared of. And then she lays out some more emotions. She says, I was very confused, and I had these waves of emotions, like I would all of a sudden be overcome with crying and feeling sad, and then I would be like really spaced out, just looking around, watching people cry or stand there despondently. And then, of course, like the police. Now, at the very end of that, we have the police again, looming large in Amanda's mind. We'll talk some more about that later. Just look at the emotions and feelings that she conveys and the order that she mentions them in, because by rights, when we list something, the first one that comes to our mind to mention is probably the most important, and as we go through the list they become less important, less of a priority to us. So scared is the first one, confused is the second one, then we've got some empathetic ones. She was crying, she was feeling sad, and then finally spaced out as well. So she was scared, as I would have it. Scared was the big priority for her. Confused, the second one. Crying and sad are in there, but further on down the priority list. She goes on, I remember just like being super out of it when outside of the house when that was going on. I was cold. Raphael gave me his jacket and the police came and asked questions and more questions, and I was just trying to put the information together. Juxtaposition once more. The police came and asked questions, more questions. And then she says, I was just trying to put the information together. So actually, police came and asked questions, more questions. We would be expecting, and I gave answers and more answers. However, she was trying to not help the police with answers to the questions. In her words there, she was taking what the police asked and trying to put the information together. That's what she says there. And also notice she uses the word just. I was just trying to put the information together. But there was definitely a mismatch there. The police came and asked questions and more questions, and I was just trying to put the information together. It's a real change of tone going on in here, and it's all come with the arrival of the police. We'll get back to Amanda shortly as we hear what the police did with her in the days following the murder. What are your thoughts on Amanda so far? Is there any more Amanda Knox that I can analyse for you? Do let me know, especially if you see her talk about the night of the murder. I think that would be really interesting. Now listen, do you ever feel like you're not being told the full story? Well, you're probably right, because this is happening all the time, and I am here to give you the key to seeing deeper, because this is all about hearing the world with new ears, and I'm on a mission to share this skill with as many people as possible, and I want you to join me in the journey. If you want to do that, hit subscribe or follow to get new episodes when they come. Join the movement. Also delve deep into the archives. There's a treasure trove of cases in the back catalogue I'm sure you will learn things from. You can be a force for this change too. Do you know someone who needs this skill? Someone who deserves to hear the truth? Hit that like button, share, recommend, because every single click, every single share fuels the fire. It allows me to dig deeper. It allows me to analyse further and bring this life-changing skill to more people. You have the power to make that happen. You can make the difference. So let's do this.
I remember being very focused on trying to piece together every single bit of information that I had gathered that morning. So like blood in the bathroom, and there was feces in the toilet, but then when I came home the second time, it seemed like the feces wasn't there. And that's something that struck me. Like I remember thinking, oh my God, I have to tell the police. And I went up to them actually, like they had by then were done talking to me and we're all standing out there. And I remember it was Monica Napoleoni, who is the head of homicide, but I didn't know who she was at the time. All she was is this skinny woman with long, lank, black hair, who I went up to her and I was like, look, like when the first time I came here, there was feces in the toilet and now there's not. And she like glared at me and I was like, why? Like, just go look, you can see for yourself. And she came back and she was like, I'm gonna remember, and there's feces in this toilet, what are you talking about? And I was just like, oh, well, I thought that there wasn't, sorry. And then I just kind of backed away and was quiet again. But she seemed really angry at me for that. And I was really confused. Like I was almost making fun or something, like I was trying to get in her way or something. But I had gone up to her, like legitimately, like I saw that there wasn't shit in the toilet when I came back the second time, and what ended up happening was it had slid down from in the bowl, and so I didn't see it. But anyway, it was just really confusing. And it was a lot of just standing there. I mean, Philomena was hysterical. Laura wasn't there. It was only Philomena and her friends and me and Raphael. And Philomena, like I said, was hysterical. And so her and her boyfriend and her friends were comforting her, and then Raphael was comforting me.
A lot to go with there, and the feces is back. I remember being very focused on trying to piece together every single bit of information that I had gathered that morning, is the first thing she says there. This, once more, is her giving us the story that she was trying to put everything together, trying to get all the information together. Is this to help the police? You know, to tell them everything that she noticed? She doesn't say that. She doesn't say why. She's trying to piece together every single bit of information. And again, we have this I remember. And again, I remember with Amanda often refers to things that were going on in her head rather than her actions that she remembers or other people's actions that she remembers. Her I remembers are very much telling us her internal thought process that was going on there. And here we go. We have the return to the unhygienic, the bodily functions or the bodily excretions. She says, so like blood in the bathroom and there was feces in the toilet. But then when I came home the second time, it seemed like the feces wasn't there. And that's something that struck me. Like, I remember thinking, oh my God, I have to tell the police. And I went up to them actually, like they had, but we were done talking to me and we were all standing out there. Strange, confusing storytelling again. Now, she talks about the second time she went in, and when I came home the second time, it seemed like the feces wasn't there. Now, that word seemed like, or that phrase seemed like, got me interested. First of all, it's the first mention of this. She didn't mention it on her first pass of the story about being back there with Raphael. She didn't say that the feces had gone. Also seemed like, no, definitely wasn't there. And she says later on, she's quite certain that it wasn't there, which is potentially knowledge that she has now informing what she says about then. But this is, again, her first mention of this. So once more, another sign that something was being missed out the story. And she's really, really focused on, I have to tell the police about the feces. And I went up to them, actually, like they had, but then they were done talking. They were all standing there. Now, this is all boiled down to just the feces. It started off with the front door being open, and then we had the blood in the bathroom, then we had the feces in the toilet, but then we've had the break-in, the smashed window, nothing being stolen, the ransacked room, but all those things are forgotten, and only now the focus is on the feces. Now, why would that be? Why? Well, look, I don't know, but I can make a suggestion to you. If that feces was proof that someone else was in there, because remember, in her telling, she does not know where this came from. It could have been one of her housemates. She doesn't think they would have done that, but, you know, they could well have. In fact, they would be the most likely people to have done it. However, for some reason, she thinks this is really important for the police to know. And why would that be? If she knew it wasn't from a housemate. In fact, she knew that was evidence that someone who wasn't part of the household had been inside the house. That is why this focus has just gone down onto this one thing, and that's the thing that she needs to tell the police, because you'll notice her switch has gone from processing and trying to get all the information together and trying to glean information from the questions to being helpful all of a sudden. But she only wants to be helpful about one thing in her telling of this, and that was there was feces in one of the toilets. Very interesting. She continues, and I remember it was Monica Napoleoni, who is the head of homicide, but I didn't know who she was at that time. All she was this skinny woman with long, lank, black hair. Now, that's very derogatory towards the policeman. She just uses her name, so there's no rank or anything like that in there. She's kind of saying, I didn't know her status at the time. Yeah, she's head of homicide, but I didn't know that because she's not important. And then she was a skinny woman. Now, I know skinny can be a positive, but skinny can also be a bit of a negative, and long, lank black hair is obviously derogatory. She says, I went up to her and I was like, look, like one of the first time I came here, there was feces in the toilet. One of the first time is what she said. I've gone back over and over again listening to it, because it could be on the first time I came here. Now, that would make perfect sense. On the first time I came here, there was feces in the toilet. But no, she says one of the first time. It's just time singular, so it's a very odd phrase. But was she there more than twice that day? She's only told us about twice, but she says one of the first times I came here. Don't know what that means, but it's an interest. Maybe it's just a slip, but it's interesting. There was feces in the toilet, and now there's not. Now that has changed from when I came home the second time. It seemed like the feces wasn't there. She's saying now, very definitely, there was feces in the toilet. Now there's not. I think this is her quoting the head of homicide there, saying, "What are you talking about?" And I was just like, "Oh, well, I thought there wasn't, sorry." And then I just kind of backed away and I was quiet again, but she seemed really angry. And I was like really confused. Like I was almost making fun of something. Like I was trying to get in her way of something, but I had gone up to her like legitimately. So what she feels here is she had just cause to go up to this head of homicide and tell them about the toilet. And she had gone up to her. So finally, she has admitted that this is the one thing that she's going to the police for. It's all about the feces. Everything else, she was listening to the questions. She didn't say she was answering them. She said she was trying to get information from them. But it's very important for her. All the things she has seen and experienced in that house boil down to feces in the toilet. She says, like, I saw that there wasn't shit in the toilet when I came back the second time. I saw that there wasn't shit in the toilet when I came back the second time. It's been that medically correct, very polite feces term up until now. That's always how she's described it, feces in the toilet. And now that they're all coming back to haunt her, the fact that she's raised it with the police, and it's obviously very, very important for her to raise with the police, and it's been knocked back in her face, it's turned from feces into shit. I saw there wasn't shit in the toilet when I came back the second time. But anyway, it was really confusing. There was a lot of standing there. So we've got standing again, that tension word. And I mean, Philomena was hysterical. So she's still banging on about Philomena's reaction. Laura wasn't there, says Amanda. Interesting that she feels the need to tell us that Laura wasn't there. It was only Philomena and her friends and me and Raphael. And Philomena, like I said, was hysterical. Yes, you have said many times Philomena was hysterical. And so her and her boyfriend and her friends were comforting her. And then Raphael was comforting me. Have you noticed all the way throughout this interview, she's very nice about Raphael. Raphael is a helper to her here. I'm not saying there's anything nefarious about that, but it's worth saying that what she repeats over and over again is Raphael was trying to calm her down, was brave enough to go around to the house with her, was comforting her, giving her his jacket. She's always very nice about her ex-boyfriend, Raphael.
And like I said, just waves of like really high emotion and then feeling just completely overwhelmed by the greatness of it that was inconceivable. Not wanting to think, like hoping that the person who was in the room wasn't actually Meredith. I was really, really thinking that, because when I heard that they said that it was a body wrapped in a blanket, I thought, well, then how do they know it's her? Like, how do they know? But then at the same time, like they said that her throat had been slit. And so, of course, they would have seen. And so I just didn't know what to make sense of it. And then we went to the police office. And the few days that I had left, I was in the police office. They took me back to the house twice. Once to go into the downstairs apartment because there was blood there, which was really freaky. They asked me to look at the bed that was splattered with blood, and they asked me if anything looked strange. And I was like, what do you mean? You mean besides the blood on the bed? Like, what are you talking about? And they're like, no, is this not normal? And I was like, well, of course it's not normal. Like, what are you talking about? And I remember like tiptoeing around there. And then the following day they brought me back again. And by this time, like there was press just lurking everywhere. I mean, there was press lurking everywhere from the beginning, but like they were really the police were very aware of their presence, and so like when I was in the back of their police car, like they had me lay down in the back seat with a jacket on top of me, but then I was brought out into the open and brought into the house, so I don't really understand why they did that.
Another shift in tone. And like I said, just waves of like really high emotion and then feeling just completely overwhelmed by the greatness of it. That was inconceivable. Greatness, interesting choice of word there. Greatness means good, means amazing, but greatness can also mean sizable, and I'm hoping that was just a bad choice of words there, rather than the goodness of it all and how great it all was. She says, not wanting to think, like hoping that what they like, the person who was in the room wasn't actually Meredith. I guess I was really, really thinking that, because when they said that there was a body wrapped in the blanket, I thought, well, how do they know it's her? She tells us she was hoping that what they like, the person who was in the room, wasn't actually Meredith. I was really, really thinking that. So we've got the actually in there, that wasn't actually Meredith. Well, it was actually Meredith, and this almost sounds like wishing, hoping against hope, or hoping against knowledge, the actually Meredith. And also, I was really, really thinking that. She could have just told us that I was hoping it wasn't Meredith. So why did she feel the need to tell us she was really, really thinking that? That to me is overly persuasive. That is using your words to work hard to persuade us that what was in your mind. She does mention once more that the throat had been slit. So this is not downplaying what has gone on at all. A reassuring factor in Amanda's concern. She says, once to go to the downstairs apartment. This is her talking about going back to the house once the police had her. We went back once to go to the downstairs apartment because there was like blood there, which was really freaky. They asked me to look at the bed that was splattered with blood, and they asked me if anything looked strange, and I was like, what do you mean? You mean besides the blood in the bed? Like, what are you talking about? She has a big disrespect for the Italian police. I get that. If she was innocent, I would also have a big disrespect for the police. I think as well, in terms of what she's describing there, if I was guilty, I still would have a big disrespect for the police, and she's letting that show in her words. But look, I said there's been a change in tone recently, kind of since the police arrived. Many less jumps back in time to go and make things that she's talking about make sense by filling in some gaps that she left earlier on there. She's into bigger themes now. The first 15 minutes of this interview focused on about 2 hours of a day, and now she's used a couple of minutes most to talk about 3-4 days. So there's much bigger themes here, much less detail about what's going on, but still lots of confusion to her. So there's a real change in tone. I've explained the change of tone, but why is that? Let me give you a hypothetical example. Let me tell you about my day today. It was split into two very distinct halves. This morning I spent on my own, and this afternoon I spent with 5-6 other people at various points in the afternoon. If I were to tell you about my day, I could tell you anything I liked about this morning without worrying that someone else is going to come along and contradict me at any point, because I was on my own. There were no witnesses to what happened. I can tell you so many things about what went on, and you'll have no idea whether I'm telling the truth or not, because no one is going to contradict me. However, this afternoon, if I started telling you all sorts of fanciful things, I'd be worried. And in fact, I couldn't do it because the people I spent the afternoon with could contradict me. They could say where I was, what I was doing, how long I was with them, where we were. They would be able to tell all sorts of things. So I have complete freedom to say what I want about the first part of my day. But then when others become involved, and listen, in the Amanda story, the change in tone happens when the police become involved. When other people are involved, then all of a sudden I've got to be much more thoughtful about what I say, because it could easily be contradicted by people and documented facts. And that's interesting to me, because the change in tone from Amanda comes from when the police arrive on the scene. She continued there in that extract saying, and they're like, no, is this not normal? And I was like, well, of course it's not normal. Like, what are you talking about? And I remember like tiptoeing around here. The following day they brought me back again. And by this time, like, there was press just lurking everywhere. I mean, there were press lurking everywhere from the beginning, but like the police were very aware of their presence. And so like when I was in the back seat of the police car, they had to lay down in the back seat with like a jacket on top of me. We have a real dislike for the police and the press coming through in Amanda's words here. And she says, but then when I was brought out into the open and brought into the house, so I really don't understand why they did that dislike for the police showing through again.
And that the second time they brought me to the house was when they actually brought me back into the apartment. And they wanted me to like describe to them about everything that I had seen when I got back there. But then the thing that they really wanted me to do was to go through the knife drawers. And that, it really hit me at that moment. Because they were asking me if I could recognize that the murder weapon was missing. And that freaked me out. I think it was one of the first times that I really, really realized that like the extent to what had happened. Because like they had asked me weird questions about like her sex habits, and so like of course there was like going through my mind like what happened to her, and like especially with the blood splatters downstairs, I thought was like she chased from downstairs like up into the house, like but it was when they asked me about knives that I flipped out. I could not hold in the tension, the fear, the just like devastating sadness, and so I was uncontrollable crying, and they actually had to like set me down on the couch, and like they brought over their interpreter and like tried to. God, I should have realized that they suspected me already then.
That's the last part of Amanda we're going to look at. She says, and the second time they brought me to the house was when they actually brought me back into the apartment. And they wanted me to like describe to them about everything that I had seen when I got back there. And then she changes tone again. But then the thing that they really wanted me to do was to go through the knife drawers. And that, it really hit me at that moment. Because they were asking me if I could recognize the murder weapon was missing, and that freaked me out. I think that was one of the first times that I really, really realized that like the extent to what had happened. Very stumbly, lots of if I could recognize the murder weapon was missing, and she then says, I think that was one of the first times that I really, really realized like the extent to what had happened. So she just thinks it was one of the first times, and it was just one of the first times. So she has realized the extent to what has happened. But again, reassuring, she calls it the murder weapon, not downplaying again what it was. She could have downplayed that and said, if I could recognize the knife that was missing, but no, she calls it the murder weapon. And she says that freaked me out. I want to know why that freaked her out quite so much. It's entirely possible this could be real, but why was that? Why was asking if she could recognize the murder weapon? Why was that what freaked her out? Is it because she felt she was in some sort of choice of either she says no and they think she's lying, or she says yes and they think she's a murderer? I don't know. She doesn't explain, but I'd really like to know what freaked her out. And she's moved to the past tense. That was the first time I realized the extent to what had happened. That is in the past tense, so it's not this what's going on now. It was the extent to what had happened. Once more, she talks about flipping out. She says, they asked me weird questions about her sex habits. And so, like, of course, there was like going through my mind, like, what happened to her? And like, especially with the blood splatters downstairs, I thought was like she chased from downstairs, like up into the house, like, but it was really when they asked me about knives that I flipped out. So again, let's focus on the knives. I can see why it would be. She talks about there, going through my mind, what happened to her. So again, she really wants us to know that she's none the wiser, that she did not know, even at this point, what had happened. What, like, was she chased from downstairs, like up into the house? And she finishes by saying, I could not hold in the tension, the fear, just like the devastating sadness. So we have more emotion going on now as she starts flipping out and things get bigger and realer for her. She says, I could not hold in the tension, the fear, just the devastating sadness. I was uncontrollable crying, and they actually had to set me down on the couch, brought over the interpreter, and like they tried to... God, I mean, I should have realised that they suspected me already then. So there's a deep dive into Amanda Knox, 20 minutes worth of her talking. And what did I notice in this second part? Look, it was that big change in tone from when she was on her own and telling quite a detailed story, but very chaotic with lots of callbacks to actually make everything make sense, through to when the police arrived and it changed all of a sudden and she was in a very different storytelling mode. I think that is very indicative of what happened. But there was just this theme of, I don't know, I was confused. I had no idea what was going on. I was trying to gather information. And I think that, again, is very telling as well. Just tell us once or twice that you didn't know, but to go say it again and again and again and again, I think is persuasive. I think that is convincing. So the big question, Amanda Knox, do I think, in my opinion, she was involved in Meredith Kercher's murder? No, I don't. For three reasons mainly. Number one, she doesn't downplay what happened to Meredith. She doesn't shy away from the graphicness and talking about the graphicness of what happened to her, the brutality of what occurred. She doesn't downplay calling it a murder or anything like that. I don't get the sense she's trying to convince us that she didn't do it. She just never enters into her head to say, I didn't do this, or try and persuade us that I didn't do this, or try and qualify what she says to show that she didn't do this as she's telling that story at all. Also, she doesn't do any fake niceness towards Meredith. She's quite cold almost towards her. She doesn't try and say she loved her, she misses her. She had no reason to kill Meredith at all. So for that reason, no, I don't think she was involved in the murder. However, does she know more than what she's been telling and what she's been telling here? I think yes. I don't think it was a surprise to her that Meredith had been murdered. Whatever that means, how close she was to it, how aware of it she was, I do not know. But I don't think there was any surprise when the police broke down that door, or when that door was broken down and it was discovered Meredith was murdered. I don't think that was a surprise to Amanda Knox at all. I think she has more to tell that she hasn't said. So there you go. There's the deep dive into Amanda Knox. Do let me know if there's any more, Amanda, you would like me to analyse. But listen, I will leave the last word to Amanda Knox.
Did you kill Meredith Kercher?
No.
Were you there that night?
No.
Do you know anything you have not told police that you have not said in this book? Do you know anything?
No. I don't. I wasn't there.